I'll be able to give you maybe more of what you need. Because it's kind of a strange topic. It's not like a didactic topic. It's more of an engagement topic. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Or I'm not. Okay, I'm going to try it this way. Sorry, a little technical difficulties. I'm not sure why it's not sharing my screen, but I will get that in a second. Here we go. Okay, so you guys should see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Yay. It worked. Okay, so this presentation is entitled Public Policy Tips for Behavior Analysts, and the reason it is this type of a presentation is because as a board member on the DBA SIG, which I have been for I think like 5 years now. I started out as the webmaster and then I moved over to treasurer, which is a little more my speed. I think we're supposed to do these presentations, and my expertise really lies in public policy and that type of thing, not so much about, of course I treat people through behavior analysis. I am a practitioner as well, but I probably don't have much more to offer on that than you guys. So this was kind of where my my expertise lies in kind of a unique situation, I think, to other behavior analysts. So we'll see, but maybe you guys have more experience than I do. In that case, I'd love to hear from you. I'll tell you a little bit about me. There's a picture of my family on the left. That's my husband, who's very tall, and me, and my 2 daughters, and my son. And my son is 14, and he has autism. And that's kind of what got me into the field, because my undergrad, I have an undergrad from Penn State, but it is in theater, technical theater. I was a stage manager and a lighting designer. So that's a little bit odd. Then I went down to Disney, worked for Disney for a little while, got into their marketing department, got a really good boss who wanted to do some development, sent me off to business school. So I went to Keenan Flagler Business School, which is University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And that was in 2000 or 98. And then I did those 2 years, and I worked in consumer marketing. When I moved to Virginia, because my husband got a job, we moved to Virginia, and I was pregnant with my first child, who's now 16. I didn't want to work full time, so I went with a company that did market research. And that actually is very similar to some of the data analysis that we do through behavior analysis. So it was a very comfortable switch for me to make the switch. And of course, I made the switch because of my wonderful, handsome son there, who I think I just heard climbing up the stairs. But he was diagnosed with autism when he was 2. He was at that point nonverbal. And my best friend is also a behavior analyst, and she's like, oh, you need to do this. Her son had just been diagnosed like 2 years prior to mine. It's very strange. And she said, you need to look into this behavior analysis thing. And I listened to her because she knows everything. And I did, and I was just won over by it. First of all, I was won over because my son did so amazingly well. And he wasn't speaking, but then once he learned to speak, turns out he was listening because he knew his alphabet, he knew his numbers. He stopped crying, which was great because all he did when he was younger was cry. It was very difficult. And he just did amazing. He's still quite amazing. He's now in 9th grade. He goes to regular high school. He does have a resource class, and his math is kind of self-contained, but for the rest of it, he's fully included. We expect him to go to college. He's just an amazing individual. And so you can't kind of watch that transformation and not be really blown by it, you know. And so I decided, actually with my friend's help, my friend Deneen Drummond said, you need to do this too, because this is right up your alley. You're very data oriented. You'd love behavior analysis. And I thought, sure, it's done this, you know, I really want to help people like Michael, my son. But once I got involved with behavior analysis, I was just so really more excited kind of by the science behind it. Not really how it works with autism, which again is great. And I love my son, and I think it's done a wonderful job with autism. But I've been kind of focusing away from autism just after seeing all the different things the science can do. For instance, one of the things I do is I treat people with Tourette syndrome through CBIT, which I took kind of an extra course and some things like that. And that's very powerful to see. But OBM and just all of the stuff. So I've been very involved. Actually, I'm going to go. There's me with my friend BFF there, and anyway, I really started to get involved in public policy in 2011. So here in Virginia, it was the autism insurance law that kind of got me involved. I went to a presentation early on for the autism insurance law, and it was finally passed after 10 years in Virginia in 2011. It still had some crazy caps on it, like that they had to be between the ages of 2 and 6, and there was a $35,000 cap, which we kind of got rid of. But the other thing that they said was, hey, also, if you're delivering ABA services, then you have to be licensed by the Board of Medicine, which 0 people were, because the Board of Medicine didn't have a license for behavior analysis. So I kept raising my hand and saying, this is going to be a big deal. And they're like, oh, no, I'm sure it's fine. We're really upset about the 2 to 6. We're really upset about this age cap. I'm like, no, I think you're going to be upset about this license things, because nobody has a license, which means nobody's getting ABA. And so I got involved in that. And in 2012, I spent a lot of time down at the General Assembly and convinced the lawmakers that we needed a license. Luckily, they listened to us. And after that, I actually was sat on the working board to develop that license, the regulations for that license. I was at that point the consumer member, because I didn't get certified as a behavior analyst until 2012 in May. And so in April, when we had the board, I was still a consumer. And I sat, they didn't seem to mind. But I got licensed, when we were licensed in September of that year, I have license number 4. So I'm very proud of that. I wish I wanted 1, that was Ethan Long, I was kind of mad. But I got 4, that's okay. So after that, I kind of got excited about this public policy thing and watching how we could change things for behavior analysis in the legislature. And a lot of things went wrong in that, and ongoing. There's, with public policy, it's always a trek. And they didn't write the regulations. We didn't write the regulations in the way I would have liked it. I would have rather them kind of connect back to the Behavior Analysis Certification Board, because I don't know if you've seen the stuff that they do, but oh my gosh, they put in a lot of research and effort to determine what is necessary for you to be a behavior analyst, like the schooling that's necessary and the oversight that's necessary and the task list. I mean, they just do an amazing job and a lot of work. And I think not everybody really gives them the credit. I know I hear complaints about the BACB. I try not to complain about them. I like them. But I think not everybody realizes how much work they put into it. And certainly the Board of Medicine doesn't realize that. And they try to do things their way, and we don't always fit in their way. And we think the BACB knows better. So that was maybe my first taste of, okay, things are not always going to work out the way we want them to work out, and we just have to keep working at it. Although in 2014, they did come to me and said, hey, you know what? We need an advisory board, because we really don't know very much about behavior analysis. And I said, yeah, I kind of agreed. So we went and we got an advisory board. We had some other things going on at that time. While I was sitting on that board and we were writing the definition of behavior analysis, I thought, ooh, this is going to be a problem for school teachers, because school teachers are doing things that look behavior analytic, like a token system, or what if they're doing the good behavior game? They're usually not, but if they were, that'd be pretty awesome. And we don't want them to not be able to do those things because they don't have a license, and there are not enough behavior analysts to go through all the schools. So we also got an exception for that. We got an exception for students, which was pretty necessary, so that you could practice before you could practice. Other things happened in 2015. The age cap on the autism insurance law was raised to 10, and I learned there that sometimes you have to do some backroom deals. That was going on, and who you talk to is really important. So we fought that quite a bit. In 2016, the rate was raised for LBAs and LABAs who are providing therapeutic consult here in Virginia. And I learned that it's not just legislature. You don't just have to go to the General Assembly. You have to be involved really in all aspects of policy and of regulations around the state, or we're a commonwealth. In December 2014, we began providing behavioral therapy services through Medicaid. I had to fight kind of hard for that one, but other people were fighting too, and that worked well, because before that we had this really crazy license through DBHDS that was really hard to get and didn't make any sense at all. Still doesn't make much sense, and we're still working on it, but it's better. The other thing we were doing is we were added to the provider list for early intervention Part C services. And that was kind of cool because actually we didn't do that. They came to us and said, hey, we're adding you. And we said, okay, thanks for noticing that we're cool. So sometimes that happens. In 2018, we became licensed mental health practitioners, and that was the first step that I took into taking over the world with behavior analysis. We'll talk about that. In 2018, we had the cap raised to 18 for state employees for the insurance bill. In 2019, that's this year, the cap is pretty much removed. So that's kind of voted through. It's basically a done deal. Even if the governor vetoes it, there are enough votes and our Democratic governor is not going to veto it. So that was done. And we were working on a bill to add LBAs and LABAs to support staff in public schools. It's kind of the quid pro quo to back in 2014 when we accepted them. But that one of the bills was tabled, which is not a good word in bill language. However, we were added to the budget language. So sometimes you can just do some really weird workaround things. That's not exactly done. I'm still kind of in the middle of that, but that's getting there. And then again, is another step into taking over the world. Another thing is the behavioral health redesign that we have going on for our Medicaid services. And I'm going to try and pull out ABA out of behavioral therapy. And that's an ongoing fight. So in taking over the world, I put this at the bottom, my ultimate goal is to open all the avenues in Virginia for licensed behavior analysts and licensed assistant behavior analysts to be paid to practice within our scope of practice, which is not limited to age or disability. So that's easier said than done, but that is the idea behind all of this. So with that, if anybody wants to put in the comments, I don't know, I'm not seeing chats, but maybe that's because nobody's chatting. I'm not used to this side of Zoom. I'm used to the facilitator side of Zoom. So maybe Annie can see it. But if there's anybody else who's gone through, or maybe you can tell me what states that you're in. I know, Michelle, you're in our state, but other people, I don't recognize other names. I don't know if there's some other, oh, look, chat came up. Hey, how about that? Okay, Florida. Okay, thanks, Michelle. She says she loves our goals. South Carolina, okay. Florida is quite different. Ohio. Florida's quite different because, of course, you guys started it all. You started it with that certified. Texas, New Hampshire. Oh, look at this, all different states. So this is exciting because every state is so different in how you do things. And again, I have a very Virginia point of view, but I'm going to try and make it broad so that it benefits anyone. But please stop me if there's something that you want to talk about. Okay. So why is this important? You know, I wish I could just say it's important, it's good enough, but no, we've got it is important because there are so many reasons it's important, but one of the things, of course, is our ethical responsibility to profession of behavior analysis. Oh, excuse me. Somehow I'm calling myself. Anyway, and that's 6.01 is affirming principles. Above all other, A is above all other professional training, behavior analysts uphold and advance the values, ethics, and principles of profession of behavior analysis. And then it leads down to disseminating behavior analysis. And I put our little DBA SIG logo there. Behavior analysts promote behavior analysis by making information about it available to the public through presentations, discussion, and other media. And of course, some people take it a little further than other people, so I probably take it a little further than most. But I love going out and telling people who know nothing about behavior analysis. And I certainly don't want to let B.F. Skinner down. He's, you know, he kind of started this profession in a way, maybe unwittingly. Certainly don't want to let, I don't know who those people are, but they look like they're friendly and maybe need behavior analysis services. I don't know. But we don't want to let people down. And so with our profession, it's just such a different profession. When I was a lighting designer, I could totally explain that to people. When I was a stage manager, I could explain that, even working in marketing. Behavior analysis, people don't understand it, or worse, they think they understand it and really don't understand it. So every time you tell somebody you're a behavior analyst, I know you have to go into this huge explanation of that. And so one day, maybe we won't. That would be very exciting for me. And I think the way we don't is to disseminate this information and to get out to especially lawmakers and the public and the press and things like that. So it's very important. Oh, I got a chat. Oh, yes. How do I? you know what, I think I need to escape this and just do it this way. Okay, so tip number 1 is to use your resources. We can't do this alone. And so if you're thinking of making a policy change in your state or your locality or your country, if you're from a different country, because I know DBA SIG is international. If you're thinking of making a policy change, please don't do it by yourself for 2 reasons. 1 is you don't have to, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And 2 is because you could mess things up if you don't really know what's going on, especially if your state organization already kind of has a plan. We had a couple of bills that were put in this bill period, not by behavior analysts, thankfully, but at first we thought there was some behavior analysts going rogue. But we'd rather not, because it sort of messed up the bill that we had in there. It turned out it was a legislator who was doing it, and she didn't quite understand behavior analysis and didn't really want to listen about it, but we crossed that road a lot. So you don't want to kind of go against it. It's better if we're all working together and we're all part of the machine. So the way to start with that is to first go to your state organization. So hopefully you have one. If you don't have one, start one. But if you are with your state organization and you need some help, Gina Green is the best help available. She's done this 1,000,001 times and understands kind of all the different things that have gone on in the state. She's great about talking to you. She'll have, you know, hour-long conversations with me, which I know it's probably painful for her, but it's very helpful for us. We're always looking for her research and her expertise and guidance. I did not put the BACB here, and I did not put ABI here because they don't tend to do those things. So Gina with APBA, because they represent behavior analysis professionals, do really focus on that. The BACB really more focuses on certifying us, and ABI is our, you know, our parent organization, but they also, and they do the schooling. Everybody kind of has their role. I think APBA is the most. So are there people out there, are you guys working now to try and change some legislature, or are you parts of your state organizations, or do you even, are there places, I think everywhere that I saw has a state organization, which is exciting. Not every state has one yet, but most of them do. I know DC just started one, that was cool. Okay, I won't make you talk if you don't want to talk, that's okay. So tip number 2 is you got to be at the table, don't be on the menu. Because if you aren't, seriously, that's, I think Elizabeth Warren said that, if you're not at the table, then you are on the menu. Don't let people make decisions about you. Don't assume that everything is just going to go fine and that you can keep practicing the way you want to practice, and that the lawmakers, the people who are doing the regulations, they have your best interest at heart, or your client's best interest at heart, you know, the consumer. So the best way to do that is to kind of find out what policy is being made around you. And you can start with places like Medicaid, looking at your Medicaid laws and getting invited to those parties. We finally got invited to the Behavioral Health Redesign organization, and that was really exciting because now we have a say, and they can't sort of ignore us or do things around us. They try, but at least we're there and we're hearing about it and we can affect it. Private insurance, go, you know, and I would do it as a group. It's harder for a provider to go and kind of affect what the private insurance companies are doing, but, you know, if you can, by all means, do it. I would definitely recommend negotiating your contract, things like that. But if you can do that through your state organization, I'll tell you that I plan to go to all the private insurers in the next couple of months and just talk to them about these CPT code changes, because they are not following them all correctly, and that's a problem because they're we have to there's code correction. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. Something within the codes where they need to be followed correctly, and if we are allowing insurance companies to make incorrect assumptions about the codes, for example, one insurance company in Virginia just sent me a letter denying my claims because of the place of location, and they have it set up where you have to do the services all in the office, and we don't do that. I don't even have an office. You're looking at my office. It's my bedroom, actually. So that's wrong, and that doesn't count. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and they're like, yeah, we're thinking we're just going to use the office thing. And I'm like, no, that's fraud. Don't do that. We have to go and fight it. It's painful, but we have to go and make sure that they are doing these things correctly. Psychologists and social workers, I think I have another word over there and I can't see it, but psychologists in some places, I know when we were getting our license, they kind of fought it. They don't always like master's level persons to be practicing in psychology. Really, it's only the doctoral level that tends to practice. Sometimes they have master's levels practitioners, but they sort of take offense to that. And so they will fight your legislation, depending on what state you're in and how organized they are. They weren't super, I mean, we had like 4 people, I think, come to the meetings to fight behavior analysis. It just wasn't enough to rock the boat. In North Carolina, most of you may know that, of course, in order to practice behavior analysis, you have to do so under a psychologist, whether they know anything about behavior analysis or not. Hopefully, it's the ones that know about it, but that makes things a lot harder. So you may want to just get in with them. Social workers, we know a lot of them because of these meetings that we're invited to, and a lot of them are friendly. Some of them don't quite understand what we're doing. I did have one ask me, actually it was a counselor who said, oh, you're a behavior analyst, so next you become an LPC? Like, no. Do you ask your doctor if he's next going to become a dentist? It doesn't, no, it's a completely different profession. But they don't always know. Public schools, private schools, you got to go and be involved in the public school things. I sat on the state special education advisory board for about 6 years. That was a really great experience. I highly recommend it. Every state has one. If you can get involved in that, if you can get to know your superintendents and the people who are doing that, just the more you know, the more you network with these people, the better chance you have of not getting bowled over. And of course, not everybody has time to do that, and that's why you have a state organization, and I'm employed by my state organization, which is helpful. So that's my tip number 2. My tip number 3 is why I'm trying to take over the world, and my thought is if you build it, they will come. I'm never going to stop trying to increase the ability to work to our scope of practice. Now, I don't want to work beyond our scope of practice. One of the things we're getting a lot of pushback now is when we made all of our behavior analysts LMHPs, licensed mental health practitioners. The other LMHPs diagnose. We do not diagnose. I had to promise the people at DHP, Department of Health Professions, I'm like, we're not acting outside of our scope of practice. We don't plan to diagnose. That's not what we want to do. We just want to be able to be paid by the people who are paying us to do things that are within the scope of practice. And if we don't keep expanding, then we're only going to be able to serve kids between 2 and 6 with autism, which is just not beneficial to our clients. It's not beneficial to our science or our profession. So I keep trying to look for different ways to increase the ability to work up to our scope of practice, which is well defined since we're licensed. If you don't have a scope of practice because you're not licensed, if you're in one of those states that's not licensed, I suggest you get licensed because it's actually a good thing. And Dr. Green can work with you on that. But, and there's a lot of toolkits out there too for that. But you can also look on the BACB website. It defines behavior analysis very, very clearly in what it is and what you can't do. And so that's like the broadest reach of your scope of practice, unless you get another certification or license, in which case your scope increases. But you would of course narrow it to your experience, and I would only work, you only work within the realm of your experience. But like I said, we have to keep building it. We have to keep working on expanding our ability to get paid for what we do, just like other people do. Use the off season to get to know your legislators. Now, every legislation season is different. So our season, we have what we call a short year and a long year. In the short year, it's just, I think it's like 8 weeks in January and February. Our season's about to end February 25th. In the long year, it goes through March. So our off season is anywhere from March to December. And the legislators, we don't want to get to know the legislators during the session because they are too busy. They're seeing 8 million people. They don't want, and I'll talk about what you need to say to them next. But in the off season, you can meet with them, especially if you're a constituent, if you live in their area, and say, hey, let me tell you about my profession and what I can do to help people in Hanover County, which is where I live, or in whatever county you're in. If you're not in that area, they're less likely to see you, but if you can find a friend who's a constituent, you can go. and just try and help them understand more about behavior analysis, which is really fun. And they're definitely more interested in speaking with you in the off season. But number 5 is that you do have to put in and support bills. And we try to put in at least 1 bill a year just so that people don't forget about us, because the legislators change, but we also want them to know who we are and what we're doing, and not forget about us if we don't keep coming back. So I would say get a lobbyist. That's what your state association, if they're a 501c6, should have no problem getting a lobbyist. I've learned actually technically, because I am paid by my state organization and I go down and lobby bills, I'm actually a lobbyist, so I have to sign up for that and get an ID card. I didn't know that till this year, and I was told, I'm like, oh, okay, but at least I get to skip the line now. The line is a lot shorter for lobbyists. During session, always have a call to action. So outside of session, like I said, you can go and say, hey, let me tell you about behavior analysis. In session, you cannot say that because they just don't want to listen to you. They've got enough going on. You've got to have a call to action, which is either support this bill or vote no for this bill. Those are, because that's all they're doing right now, they're voting. So before session, you might want to get them to put in this bill, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But if you're talking to just a legislator who's not put in your bill, and you want them to either support it or not support it, you want them to vote yes or no. And that's the biggest thing that you have to have on your piece of paper. So when you go down to visit them at the Capitol, you come and you bring a business card, because if you don't have a business card, they look at you funny. If you don't have a business, like we can get business cards for $10 at Vistaprint, or you can just go to Office Max and print them out yourself. That's what I did before I had like a company or anything. Just had my name. It's good enough. All you need is your name, and a phone number is nice. Get a business card. Target legislators on key committees and the right party. So I don't talk to all 140 of our legislators every session because they're just too many. What you want to do when you're so we put in a bill, let's say we find a key legislator, and usually we look for the party that's in power, and we go to somebody who's friendly on that side, because they're more likely to be successful. And we find people who has like interests, maybe like positions, their jobs outside of that. And then we get them to put in the bill, and then when we get the bill in, we follow it and we figure out where it is. So in Virginia, I know in different states it's different things, but in Virginia it gets sent to a committee or a subcommittee first. So that's who I'm talking to first. So I go to every subcommittee member or every committee member and say, hey, you're going to be seeing this bill on your docket in the next day or so. Please support it, or please don't support it. I've never done that before, but I know we would have to do that at some cases. And that's what you say, and this is why you should support it. And it's like maybe a 5-minute thing. And if I can get to see the legislator, great. Usually I have to see their LA, their legislative assistant. But what I don't want to happen is for them to see our bill the very first time when it's at that committee, because then they don't know what to do. They don't really have anything. If there's no opposition to this bill and I'm coming and I'm the only one telling them, then all they have in their head is I'm to support this bill. And that's good enough for me. So just make sure that you're very clear with your call to action during the session. I see so many people down there who just want to talk about, especially they're for the Disability Awareness Day, which is great. And they just want to talk about disability awareness, and the lawmakers will listen to you, but they don't know what to do with that information when they're in season. It's like, what bills do I need to say yes to? And that's what you need. That's what you need for them. So number 6 is to use behavior analysis with the policymakers. They don't like that, and they often wonder when you say you're a behavior analyst if you're down there kind of figuring out what they're doing or observing them. I don't know, they'll say that to me. But what you need to do is figure out what it is that motivates them. And what motivates most, if not all of them, is getting reelected. That the biggest problem with legislation these days is that is their goal, and that makes them look at the short term rather than the long term. And what our country needs, in my opinion, is for us to look at the long term. And we don't, because in the long term, they're not getting reelected. In the short term, they are. So sometimes they go against what makes sense because they're focused on the short term of getting elected. And so you need to know that. So still my long-term focus, again, is to have behavior analysis for everyone. In the short term, I might want to save money here. So if I can prove that this saves money, like we did with we tried to do that with the behavior analysts in schools. We have a problem in Virginia with a lot of kids getting suspended and then sent. It's the pipeline to prison, they call it. So it's a key indicator of somebody who might be going to jail if they've been suspended a lot of times. Well, we can help with that, because often when they're suspended, it's because of behavior issue. We can help with that in schools. The other thing is they often get sent out to private schools, and that costs a lot of money, and that's a hot topic for them. So I can save you money, and I can help you with this PR problem that you're having about Virginia being the pipeline to prisons. So just know what's important to them. And sometimes you have to look up different lawmakers, different parties have different things, and that's what you're gonna look at. And it is usually money. We're getting reelected. So when I started this, and again, if anybody wants to jump in, please feel free to ask a question or comment or anything. But when I started this presentation, I told you about my link with autism, and then how I kind of moved into more of a pro-ABA. Autism kind of has that tenuous link. I mean, really, you got to give Autism Speaks a hand. I don't know if any of you know Judith Orsetti. She's in charge of 20 states, so she might not be with all of your states. Texas, definitely, probably New Hampshire, South Carolina, yes. She's amazing. Her son has autism. He received ABA when he was younger. She's just an amazing person to fight for us, and she's a really, really great resource. But we don't always want to go with that autism thing, because again, we don't always want to be associated only with autism. And they've done such a great job stumping or getting that word out and linking ABA with autism and saying that it's the best treatment for autism, that it's kind of damaged us somewhat. I don't think I'd ever go back and not have that happen, because really it got us much further than we would have, because they are relentless. They are great advocates. But sometimes we have to say, you know what, the ABA can do different things. And sometimes the way you do that is you choose a different legislator to do your bills. One of our bills failed, I think, a couple of years ago, because it was put forth by the same person who did the autism insurance bill, and they thought what we were doing was working around autism insurance. And we weren't, but because that's what he was known for, that's what it's linked with. So we talked to him about it, and we're like, we think we should go with a different legislator, and he agreed. He didn't, take it, because he really believed in the cause, so he didn't take it bad. But there are a lot of different things that you have to do. You have to know when to kind of ride that autism train, and then know when not to, and that gets a little bit difficult, I think, a lot. Tip number 9, right? No, 8, excuse me, is investigate all the revenue sources. So you'd be surprised at what revenue sources there are to get paid for. And again, the reason we're looking at money is because that's what's going to drive our profession. So if you are doing great things, but you can't get paid for it, or it's all private pay, which means it's really difficult for your consumers or your clients to pay you, then your profession is not going to do that well. We really do need to look at those payment sources. And we want to investigate all the revenue sources we can. I'm always hearing about different funding streams that other people know about that we don't really know about. Because we're not in that mental health world. The newest one that I was talking to somebody about, and we'd kind of spoken about it. I knew about it before, but I really hadn't hit it heavy, was FACT funding, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it goes through the CSAs, and it's kind of wraparound services funding, and you can get behavior analysis services paid for that way. So you don't want to let those things go. And as soon as we're doing a search engine, we're building a search engine for providers in Virginia. And as soon as we get that up and running, I'm going to go to the different CSAs and say, hey, guess what? Did you know about this profession and the things that we can do? Well, here's some people who can help you in your area. And what can we do to kind of stay in touch and learn about this? So you're going to want to investigate all the different revenue sources, because other people are. And that's going to help us help us stay. My 9th tip is to get used to disappointment, because there's a lot of disappointment and things happen that you don't understand, especially there at the General Assembly. You're like, what? And my lobbyist is constantly having to explain things to me, like, or this was before we had a lobbyist, when we had put in the bill originally to become licensed mental health practitioners. It was, they sent it to appropriations, which is always scary because that means that there's a money associated, even though there was no impact. Or no, it was the LBAs in schools. There was no impact because all we were doing was adding LBAs to the support staff language in the code that talks about schools. So we would be on the same par as school psychologists or school nurses. They could also hire a behavior analyst if they wanted to. It was not a mandate. But they sent it to appropriations anyway, which I still don't understand to this day. They did it this time too, and that's what we got in the budget language. So when they sent it to appropriations, the guy who was putting the bill in, so our bill sponsor, voted no. And I'm like, well, why are you voting against our bill? And he's like, well, I'm voting no. I don't want it to go to appropriations. I want it to go straight to the floor. I mean, there's just so much going on. It died that year in appropriations. So we just knew that we needed to come back. There's a lot of disappointment. Every time I feel like I take 2 steps forward, I take 1 back. And but you just got to get used to it and keep that goal in mind and keep working forward, keep forging ahead with those relationships, or understanding that not everybody who's in power is going to be in power. So you may just have to kind of wait through until you get somebody better who understands your stuff. And then this is my last one. Well, before the summary, my last tip is to keep the end goal in mind. You have to take a lot of baby steps. And again, I told you what my goal is. My goal is to allow behavior analysts to be paid for what we do within our scope of practice. That's so every bill that I put in, every time I talk to people, that's kind of my end goal, and that's in mind. You may have a different goal, but whatever your goal is for your state, and I guess really the goal overall is to build behavior analysis in Virginia, or to increase behavior analysis in Virginia, and that's how I feel I need to do it. But that's my goal. So sometimes I put in bills that don't do all that much, or if I lose them, I don't really care, because really what I was trying to do was just remind the lawmakers that I'm here, you know, and maybe I need to come back next year, and I don't want them to forget me. They don't now. Some of them know me. My lawmaker knows me. He's the head of appropriation, one of the appropriation subcommittees, and I thought it was funny in the last one we were in. He says, "Hi, Christy, you're here again," and I'm like, "Okay." My delegate just called me by my first name. That's fine. That's good. Had to laugh at that, but you got to keep that end goal in mind and not think that it's a short term. Okay, we won this bill, we're done. We're never done until we are on the same par as, you know, psychologists and social workers, and everybody knows what we do. We're not going to be done, and even then, I don't think we'll be done. But so in summary, and then we have like 20 minutes. So hopefully we'll get some more information from you guys about what you're doing around there. But like I said, in summary, I would contact your state organization. If you don't have one, make one. Ask to join their public policy committee. If you don't have a lobbyist, get one. Not you personally, but your state organization. A lobbyist, you'd be surprised at how, I mean, they're expensive, but if you can get one, and maybe you can't right away, but just have that as a goal. Look at your state resources to stay informed on what's happening. We have something called the Virginia Town Hall. And so it's like an email. I got an email a couple of times a week that says what you can select, kind of which things you want. I don't know how to tell you how to find it, and that's in your state, except you just look at the stuff that the resources that the state has. It tells us kind of what laws are there, what regulations are open for review. We make public comment a lot right now. Our regulations for therapeutic consult are up, so we're going to make some public comment on that. We as VABA will recommend others make comments sometimes, and sometimes we're like, you know what, it's just enough to have one comment from the state organization. We always, when we recommend public comment, though, we tell people, you know, say what you want, but this is what we recommend. And then talk to lawmakers and policymakers, not just lawmakers, so not just your legislators, but all the people who are doing things that affect you. So maybe state workers, like in the schools or in the social services or behavioral services, Medicaid, things like that. Just become friends with them, or colleagues at least, and so that they know your name and they know what you're there for, and keep working with them. And we don't want to stop. You start with the ones who represent you, lawmakers, but don't stop there. You can keep going further, especially if you have a friend who's a constituent. But even not, sometimes they'll just talk to you, especially if they're like, we get a lot of doctors or pediatricians will talk to us, teachers will talk to us, people who are lawmakers and teachers, because they kind of understand what we're doing. there's a little graphic there on kind of how a bill gets passed. It's really simplistic. It is so not that simplistic. But a concerned citizen takes an idea, representative writes a bill, committee members review the bill, the governor receives the bill. If he, or the House and Senate vote on it, and then the governor receives it, he can sign it. And it really does go that way. It's a little more involved, but okay. So please chat and tell me what were you guys doing? And was this helpful? I hope. I had no idea what to do on public policy too, because it's like, well, how do you, it's not like the sexy presentations that you get on verbal behavior and things like that. So sorry. Tried to make it as fun as possible. But tell me, other folks, what are you guys doing? What are you doing in Ohio and Texas and New Hampshire and Florida? Or maybe you don't know, and that's okay too. But don't all talk at once. Are ABA therapists allowed in public schools in Virginia? Ooh, that's a good question. And the answer is sometimes. So some schools are, now Virginia I said was a Commonwealth, and with Commonwealths you find more decentralized school systems. So like in Iowa, I've talked to Sean Casey about the stuff he did in Iowa, and there's no way we could have replicated what he did in Iowa here in Virginia, because like the Virginia DOE doesn't really have much in the way of teeth. So that means that each locality, and there are 200 and I can't remember, 238, something like that, localities. We have about 1,200 schools. Each locality and each school is different. So some schools are really open to allowing ABA therapists in there. And then some schools are like, nope, don't want to see you, sorry, you can't come into the classroom, can't observe or anything. What we've been working on is trying to get behavior analysts employed by the public schools. One pitfall with that is sometimes people they'll grow their own. So they're like, okay, we need a behavior analyst. So you, Joe teacher, you become a behavior analyst. And then they'll do all of their supervision within that school, which I don't really agree with, because I think you should get that broad view and not just do that. So that's somewhat of a problem. So we're gonna actually, as VABA, we're trying to increase kind of the supervision opportunities so that people can work out of it. So in answer to that question, are they allowed in schools? I would say sometimes, and we're trying really hard to have that good relationship. I actually work a lot, every once in a while, with Henrico County Schools. They'll call me in to do an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, which is good because you can get in there and partner. And Michelle says, is moved from work, yeah, from moving from California, where the BCBAs did the FBAs in schools, to Virginia, where they don't have BCBAs involved at all. And I would say sometimes there are some counties that do have BCBAs involved. But you're right, like the guy who teaches the class for the FBAs is just not a behavior analyst, and I think like the sample form lists revenge as a sample function, and so you just want to go, oh no, please stop. That is so not helpful to have revenge as a function, because A, it's not, and B, well, it just causes harm everywhere you look. So yeah, I'm with you. It's just a frustrating thing, but we are trying to increase that, and there are some schools that do it really well. So let's see, live in Oklahoma, is that right? Oklahoma, and have poor services, just insurance starting in 2016. Don't have Medicaid coverage, so a large portion of families can't afford services. More movement with Medicaid. Yes, Michelle, revenge is not a function. Yes, and I would say, Leslie, if you want, we can talk offline. And actually, I'm gonna go to my next slide just for that reason. There is my email and there is my phone number. So please, 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 let's get involved with Medicaid. You can start with getting Autism Speaks to help you. Dan Unum has been really on that, and he will talk to you about that and help you get that involved. But it is a state-by-state thing, and even the Affordable Care Act too didn't lay out, it said you could have behavioral services, but you don't have to, so each state kind of defines it in their own way. But it takes going to your Department of Medical Assistance Services, that's what it's called here, DMAS, or finding that department and going in and talking to them about what ABA can do. And I would stress just from the outset what ABA can do for kids with autism and for other people, because it's not just about autism, and so you want to kind of plant that seed ahead of time. But I would enlist help, and the two people for help that I would enlist are Gina Green at APBA And then I would also talk to Autism Speaks. And Dan Unum is no longer with Autism Speaks, but I know he has been. There's a autism. Anybody familiar with the Autism Law Summit? There's a listserv. It's also, there's a summit they go every year. I actually won an award, but I didn't know because I didn't go, and then I found out a couple of years later. But they're fun. That's how I know about the law summit. But there's a really cool law summit that oh, it was in Texas last year. Okay, yeah, so that's good. I need to go sometime. But they and again, remember, autism is kind of on that side, but a lot of times they have those people who can really go in and fight for you and understand that stuff. So I would start with them, but also include Gina Green, and then email me if you want some more specific help. Master student. So Tiara says she's a master student in ABA and OBM in Florida, but originally from Indonesia. Oh, wow. Only 3 BCBAs there. Oh my gosh. Well, that's good that some of it does take behavior analysis into policy level. And if are you planning, Tiara, are you planning to go back to Indonesia? Awesome. So it's going to be different. I mean, you know, every state here is different than I think what Virginia does. I only know Virginia, but the more, and I mean, why do you think that there are only 3 BCBAs practicing? Is it because people don't know about behavior analysis? Is it because it's not paid for? I think those are kind of the reasons. And so if you look at those barriers to why ABA is not across the country, and it's really exciting that you are learning about it and then going back. You're kind of on that ground floor, and that's great. And I'm really, really amazed that you're doing that. But you may need to kind of figure out what it is that you can do to, again, tell lawmakers about what behavior analysis is, and then what it can do to help people, and then try and get people to pay for it. Because the more you have, if you have people paying for it, then you have people who are going to do it. A lot of times people aren't going to, you know, enter a field if it's not going to, if they're not going to make any money at it. You got to make a living. And so I think that's kind of where you start. It's all about that dissemination. But that's really exciting. Is there anything else? I think we're at CEU level, right? We hit our 15-minute mark or so. But I would still love to hear from other people on what you guys are doing. And again, there's my contact information if you want to talk offline and how to sort of get things started and where to look. We can look at your state specifically, because again, it's just different each state. I know a very little bit about Maryland too, because that's where I grew up. And amazing. Hopefully y'all have licenses. Are places, let's see, Oklahoma, I would guess you guys don't have a license. Florida, you do. No, you don't. Florida has the certification, right? But I know you're having problems with Medicaid letting you in, which is a whole nother can of worms. Yeah, Cali tried. Yeah, you know, but California is so interesting because you have so many behavior analysts. Like, it's the #1 state for behavior analysts. So I guess there's a lot, it seems to be working. And I think they'll probably keep trying, my guess is, and that eventually, hopefully it'll get there. South Carolina doesn't. Texas just got licensure. That's exciting. New Hampshire doesn't. Sometimes it takes a change in, there are more, Michelle says there are more in California than all of Richmond. Yeah, but actually Virginia is the 8th largest state for behavior analysis. So that's exciting. I think Pennsylvania is before us. California's first. Florida, I believe, is second. I just looked at that chart just out of curiosity. You can go on the BACB website and count people. But yeah, so licensure, you know, I mean, if you can push it, Texas is probably 3rd, yep. If you can push it, it's important because it really, first of all, it covers you. It gives you protections, and it protects your clients or your consumers, which is really important. And so it hopefully will kind of stop people from practicing without a license, but it doesn't always. We definitely have groups of individuals, types of individuals who practice, and I think the things that they're doing are not fall under our purview, and they're not licensed as anything else. Now, if they're licensed as a psychologist and they're practicing behavior analysis, great, because if they have that in their scope of practice, because they're licensed. And so if they do something bad that hurts somebody, somebody's going to come down on them. But there are other things that are other professions that are not, and there's no recourse. Like, what do you do if they hurt you? If it's somebody who's like doing behavioral intervention and they're not licensed and they're not board certified, who can you go to? It's really scary, and they degrade our profession. So you appreciate being licensed. Oh yeah, and practice in the state. Much greater protections for professionals and families. I agree, Michelle. I think it's much easier to work under a license. And it was funny because when we were licensed by the Board of Medicine, we did not choose that. And we are the only state in the union that's licensed by the Board of Medicine. It was because they put in the autism insurance bill, and then the governor tried to delay it. Really, I really feel like, I mean, like, he's not going to say he tried to delay it, but he tried to delay it, okay? He put that $35,000 cap on it. He put the age cap on it because it originally passed with no age cap. And he said that behavior analysis had to be licensed by the Board of Medicine. So now, I mean, granted, it was still a good start, because if I look at my son who had autism, when he was first diagnosed, they said his diagnosis was cranial encephalopathy. Because if you had said the word autism, the insurance company would have said, oh, pre-existing condition, we're dropping him. So at least the autism insurance law, even if it didn't allow behavior analysis at first, at least it stopped that practice where they had to treat people with autism. But you know, he stuck us in the Board of Medicine. We would not have chosen the Board of Medicine, but they've been somewhat hospitable. I think when we get to about 2,000 licensees, we are going to probably try and get our own, and that would be the best, is to get your own licensing board. And unfortunately, is California, when it failed in California, is it because were you trying to get your own licensing board? Because a lot of times it might be more successful if you try to slip in under somebody else's, or were you even going for social work or psychology and they still failed it? Does anybody know? The BCBAs were anti-licensure. Wow, really? They just don't know. Yeah, that's because I'm sure they're scared. You don't want to change something. If you got something that's working well, that's great. But I don't know. I mean, I think I agree with you, Michelle. I would appreciate being licensed because they're just greater protections for everyone. And you didn't understand it before moving. That's very interesting. Huh. Well, that's work for Gina. I know. I'm sure she's tackling that, but that's interesting. And I know North Carolina, you know, is having all that problems with the psychologists. They're working on trying to get their own. But if you can get your own board, that's the best. If you can't, slipping under somebody else. You know, Board of Medicine's been kind of interesting. I would recommend it. It has its troubles, but at least they don't think they know what we do. It's worse when I think somebody thinks they know what you do and then they try to govern it. Then they're like, we don't know. Just do what you do and then give us a board so you can explain it to us. So we have difficulties with them in like, they don't understand the experience part, so they want you to, so they'll ask you questions about since you've graduated from school. And of course a BCBA might have graduated for 2 years with their certificate degree before they able to take the board exam because of the experience thing. Yeah, they are. We keep fighting them. The Board of Medicine regulations are very minimal. We keep fighting them to be just, if you're a BCBA, that's good, because BCBA is nice, is getting better, really. You know, they used to be more loosey-goosey, but now you have to follow the ethics and all of the supervision guidelines that they have. They really are getting better. And I think if we can follow that, and we just have one master, that's another thing I present on a lot, is like, in Virginia, we've got 3 masters. We've got the BACB, we've got the Board of Medicine, and we've got the payers, because they come up with strange regulations. So thank you guys for contributing.
Great. Well, Christy, thank you so much for presenting today. This was a great topic, and it seemed as if a lot of folks had a lot of comments and questions. So that was great. And if you guys want to contact Christy after this, please write down her contact information. She is our public policy guru at the DBA, and we're very excited that we were able to have you present today. One last thing, I wrote down that there was one individual who did not put their name in the chats. it was a 601 number. If you can please email the DBA with your name and also what your email is, I will be able to send you the survey link. And our email is broadcastbehavior. disseminateaba@gmail.com. Broadcast behavior is our website.
That's our website.
Yeah, sorry.
disseminateaba@gmail.com.
Yeah, disseminateaba. So please email me so I'll be able to send you the survey link and so that you'll be able to get your certificate. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, you can also email the board or Christy and we'll be able to answer any questions you may have. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you. Take care.